Today I want to talk about possibly the most important realization I made in my own personal development journey and has made all the difference for me in terms of getting results in my life. Watch this video to learn more. So firstly, let me start off with a story. I used to be the type of person that just did not have the ability to see something through to the end at all. I would have these ideas, these grand visions of maybe playing the piano or learning a language or something like that. And I'll commit to it for a certain period of time, but then something would pop up, maybe some problems, or maybe I would have some limiting beliefs about whether I'd be able to improve or get to the level I want to. And at that point, my interest would wane, my motivation would go down, and inevitably I would just quit and then start something else. A new project, something that I'm excited about. At some point, I had this realization. I look back at all these projects that I kicked off, all these things that I've been trying to do in order to bring benefits into my life. And I realized I just didn't get any results out of it. I wasn't getting any of the benefits that I wanted. And somehow I noticed that the reason why this wasn't working, the reason why I just wasn't getting any of the results that I wanted is because I just quit too soon. I wasn't focused enough, and I didn't see something through for a long enough period of time. I kept quitting before the results were coming. So at that point, I made a decision. I was like, right, the next project I decide to do, I'm just gonna stick to it and see it through. And lo and behold, that project got me results. And today, that's a successful business. This change in mindset, this change in psychology, this cultivated ability of seeing stuff through was so prolific for me, such a big thing. You could literally draw a timeline of my history and right down the middle draw a line. Before I made this change, before I had this epiphany, it was mostly failures and just a graveyard of incomplete projects. And after this point in time, it's mostly successes. This single epiphany I had has literally transformed my results getting ability. So when I'm talking about seeing things through to the end, what do I actually mean? I'm talking about this dogged persistence, this thing that happens when you're in the middle of a project, in the dip, where things might not be going well, where you're pushing as hard as you can in the trenches, but you're basically getting nothing to show for it. You're getting none of the benefits, none of the results. It's like when you're sat at your desk trying to learn that language and you're reciting that same old boring passage over and over again, but you keep doing it. Or when you're writing your 50th blog post on your website that nobody is visiting yet, but you know you just have to persist. Or when you're 6 months into building a company and you barely got any results to show for it. You've been hustling day in, day out for the last 6 months, but you're still not making any money yet. I'm talking about that discipline to keep going on something where it might not be going necessarily to plan and where you might not be feeling great about it, but you know you just have to keep going anyway. This is what I'm talking about when I mean seeing things through to the end. So let's talk about why is this so important? Why is this skill so important to cultivate? Well, it all comes down to value. If you want to make something that the world is going to value, if you want to have something that the world is going to say, oh, that's valuable, that generally is going to take a long period of time. Let's run through some examples of this. Let's talk about your career. Cal Newport in his book, Talent is Overrated, talks about career capital as something that you need if you want to advance your career. It's basically the accumulation of valuable skills so that your employer looks at you as indispensable. He says you need tolerance, patience, and the capacity to work on things that are hard, not for weeks, not for months, but for years to make this happen. So in short, what he's saying is if you want to advance your career, you have to hustle for a long period of time. How about if you want to build a company? Well, I can tell you that the number of companies that are profitable in the first year are next to none, even 2 years. In fact, a guy called Will Schroeter started his first company at the age of 19 and has started 8 companies since then. He says that it takes 4 years or so for a startup to be looking like a real business. He then goes to say that in total it takes between 7 and 10 years before the business starts looking like the business that you dreamed of initially. In short, if you want to build a business, you've got to look at it in terms of years and not months. Let's say you want to get good at a skill. Well, Malcolm Gladwell talks about this in his book Outliers. He says it takes, on average, 10,000 hours to become a world-class performer. You won't need 10,000 hours to get really good at something or exceptional at something rather than world-class, but you still need 1,000 hours or 2,000 hours, a substantial time investment to make that happen. How about fitness? Well, I know we're sold this notion that we can get rock hard abs in 5 days, but that guy who is absolutely ripped with a large amount of muscle hasn't done that in a few weeks or a few months. He spent years working on his physique. What about if you want to be a professional like a doctor or a lawyer? On average, it takes 9 years to become a doctor. Or how about being financially free? You know, anybody who is financially free hasn't done that overnight or in a few months or in a few years. Generally speaking, we're talking 5, 10, 15 years to make this happen. Saving money on a regular basis, developing some kind of investment strategy. And eventually this can snowball into having enough money to retire. I'm giving you all these examples to show why just seeing things through and sticking with something for long enough is a necessary component for big success. Some things really just take time to come to fruition. You might be listening to this thinking this is bad news, that you have to go through all this just to get a result or get some success. But I want to argue to you right now that this is actually a really, really good thing. Why? Because it's extremely rare to find somebody who has these abilities. So if you can build this ability to see something through, if you can develop this staying power, then you are going to be an elite class of people. You're going to be extremely valuable. The other reason why this is good is that because so few people have the staying power, the results when you reach the tipping point are generally really, really large. Imagine what it's like to be an employee who is indispensable to that company. Imagine what kind of benefits you get from that company. Maybe you can take a 3-month sabbatical. Imagine how much you're going to get paid. Or imagine what it's like to be financially free, to get to the point where you don't have to worry about where your next paycheck is going to come from and you don't have to answer to anybody. Or imagine what it's like to own a successful company that you've managed to step out of. You have this machine working for you and you don't have to put in the hours every day anymore. You're pretty much free to do what you want. You can see in all these cases that the results are just in orders of magnitude higher than what you can get if you don't go through this process. And that's why high performers are happy to push the rewards back a year or two, because they know that most people won't do that. And that gives them an edge. So I want to be very, very clear about something. What I'm describing here is not just not quitting. So quitting sometimes can be the right decision. Sometimes new information comes to light, the circumstances have changed, and stopping and cutting your losses is the right thing to do. But what I'm talking about here isn't about not quitting. What I'm talking about here is much bigger than that. I'm talking about a package of skills, like the ability to decide deliberately, going through a very rigorous decision process about what you're going to commit to and what you want, so you don't get any surprises along the way. It's also about managing your expectations, taking a look around you and seeing exactly how long things take to come to fruition. Of course, we're sold these ideas from these big magazines and these big media outlets that we can get rich in 6 months, and we see all these success stories and we can get 5-minute ads. We get advertised this all the time. But in reality, we need to manage our expectations and realize that these are edge cases. These are exceptions and not the rule. It's also about having the ability to go through the emotional labor that's required to see something through. So when you're halfway through a project, something pops up and you're a bit afraid of it, you don't just bow down to that fear. Instead, you have this ability to face that fear head on, to work through it, and you carry on relentlessly, regardless of being scared. It's also about beliefs. It's about making sure that you don't have any limiting beliefs that are going to hold you back. So if you see a competitor that's doing way better than you, you genuinely have this belief that if you work hard and you practice, you can get as good and better than that competitor, as opposed to having this limiting belief where you believe that you'll never be good enough and so you quit. So my point is, this is not just being persistent. This is not just not quitting. This is about learning a variety of skills and getting your psychology primed so that you are ready to see stuff through to the end. So here's the good news. I've deliberately called this a skill. This ability to see something through is a skill. And the reason I've called it a skill is because it's learnable. Just like you can learn to play the piano, you can learn to change your psychology, to change your approach, to change the way you think about things in order to see it through. And that's why I made this video. Firstly, I want to tell you why I think there's a huge opportunity if you can leverage this skill. So this video is all about selling you this. But I also want to tell you that I'm going to make a series of videos over the next few weeks that goes into each of the different skills that make up this big skill of seeing something through. So I'm talking about deliberate decision making, managing your expectations, managing your emotional labor, and changing your limiting beliefs. Videos on all these topics are coming up shortly. So in summary, the ability to see something through to the end is incredibly rare. Most people cannot do it, but those that do profit massively. If anything I've said in this video resonates with you, then don't worry, stay tuned to this channel,
because you'll receive a bunch more videos shortly about how you can generate this stickability. I hope you liked my video. If you did like my video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.